how much clean data do you really need feeding into that box, right? You can think of like language is that ultimate dirty data. That I mean, when you're talking about communication, like it's very, very messy, noisy, there is no structure. And then again, purely thinking about ChatGPT as a black box, you take that language and it is able to make sense out of it, right? I mean, from a very, very messy data.
I'm thrilled to have our guest Soumyadeb Mitra today on the podcast. Soumya joins us as founder and CEO at RudderStack. Soumya, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jason, for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be talking to you about the data and the future of data and so on. Like, this is something which is very close to our heart at RudderStack and also like me. So yeah, excited to be diving into that today.
Got it. And for our listeners, Soumya and I have known each other for a couple of years now. While we're both CDPs, we do actually run at opposite ends of the spectrum. RudderStack is much more focused around data collection and infrastructure, and we're more focused on the application side of things. With the disclaimer, there is certainly some overlap between the two, but one of the reasons why I'm super excited about our conversations today is, we actually, between our two platforms, represent a breadth of capabilities across, the universe that anyone can remotely consider to be CDP. So maybe you can just, kick off and tell the listeners just a little bit about your background and how you got and how you started RudderStack.
Yeah, and before I do that, I'll highlight one other thing. Like, both of us also went to grad school and like did like PhDs and went through the program. So there's like more overlap than just being in the same industry and so on. So like, yeah, I think and regarding that, my background, yes, as I said, I started my career with like a PhD in data. I have been kind of working in the data space for a very long time. After my PhD, I decided to come to Silicon Valley, joined a company called Data Domain. Data Domain was, for folks who don't know, it was the Frank Slootman's first company as a CEO. So like, he is now a big shot, like as CEO of Snowflake, took multiple companies public, but Data Domain was his first company. Really learned a lot working under him. And like the company like had a spectacular success, eventually got acquired by EMC. Left that to start a company called Mariana with two other co-founders. And both my co-founders were marketing folks, and I was coming from the data side of things. And our vision was to use ML to automate a lot of things marketing does. And that was kind of my first exposure to like CDP, customer data, and so on. Like, before that, it was all about like high performance computing data. Like, that's what like data was cool about. So yeah, did that for 4 years, sold it to a company called 8x8. And at 8x8, again, did a similar thing, set up an internal, you couldn't call it like we didn't call it a CDP, but the high level idea was to like get all the customer data, build interesting use cases on top of that data, like mostly ML use cases like churn prediction and LTV prediction and so on. And a lot of the experience in that process is what prompted us to start RudderStack. So yeah, we do call ourselves as CDP as well, but like as you said, like CDP is such a broad category, and there are like so many different kind of vendors in the space. We are approaching this from a very, very data perspective, right? I mean, that's my background. That's what I get excited about, and so on. So, yeah.
Great, yeah, and it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned the grad school connection. And when I sort of reflect on my grad school experience, the joke I always like to tell is that it took me 5 years into my machine learning PhD to realize that the value in data isn't in the infrastructure or the AI per se, but how you use it. So it's not that the data infrastructure isn't absolutely critical, but really the business applications and the end use cases are equally critical. So which brings us to why we're here today. And I'll give a bit of a preamble before I get to our big question. Soumya just went through at a high level what RudderStack does and where RudderStack came from. Listeners of this show will have an understanding around what Simon Data does and what our focus is as well. You look at other players in the space. Salesforce has their CDP, which they're rebranding as part of their data cloud initiative, and they proclaim that they're going to hire 2,300 data engineers. So who knows what that may or may not look like 1 or 2 years from today. And then of course you have folks who are these pure play reverse ETL providers who do a relatively small set of operations, but make it incredibly easy to sign up and try it out with pretty good self-serve and trial capabilities. You put all that together alongside sort of the first generation of CDPs with Segment, and you have you're sort of going to a New York City diner, as both Soumya and I live in New York City, and you sort of see a bit of everything. Like, why is lobster on the diner here? How is that possible? And to a marketer today, even folks who are more technical, it can be incredibly confusing. So today we're going to talk about a really relevant topic, and we're not going to catalog everything that exists today because we'd be here for hours. The show, we're trying to keep it short and sweet at 20 minutes. But we're really just going to dive into the topic around what do we think things are going to look like in 2 years? Because if you're making technology and infrastructure investments today, you want to make sure that you don't have to re-platform again once you're stood up, which happens all too often, quite frankly. We're going to cover that across data infrastructure, across the application tier and use cases. Then we'll touch on AI for a little bit at the end. But Soumya, as long as RudderStack, you all are really focused primarily around data infrastructure, maybe you can talk about where things are today and where you see things heading. We'll call it the end of 2025.
I kind of think about trends and so on in terms of macro trends, right? What is happening? What is the big thing that is happening today and that will persist and impact the landscape in a big way in the next 2, 3, 5 years, right? And I think if you're in the data space, unless you're completely disconnected, the biggest trend now is cloud data warehouses, right? Companies 5 years ago, very few companies had cloud data warehouses. You had to put a lot of infrastructure to collect data, process data, and so on. And now that has completely democratized, right? I mean, we see companies even as small as 20 people setting up a cloud data warehouse, swiping credit card and getting that data, right? So I think that is the big macro trend. And so everything, not just customer data, it's across the board. People are realizing that why do I need a SIM? For logs and so on. Why can't I just centralize everything in a cloud data warehouse, right? And that has a lot of benefits. So, and the same thing will happen, I believe, in customer data. People will centralize pretty much everything around the customer data on cloud data warehouses. So now if you look at that, if you kind of go with that vision, then it kind of comes back to what does the architecture around that looks like, right? I mean, you need to first get data into the cloud data warehouse and make sure the data is clean and all the jazz around the big focus on compliance, blah, blah. So that's kind of, you have to make sure data is properly ingested in the cloud data warehouse. You have to make sure that it is properly modeled in the cloud data warehouse. Modeling means stitching identities and all the other things that you do with customer data. Other domains will have other modeling challenges, right? And then finally, the goal is not just to get the data, but also make it effective, right? Drive business outcomes, business applications on top of that data. And that's why I think you talked about reverse ETL, but it's just one of the category players, but there are CDPs like you, Simon, and so on. That's really strong at making sure that is activated properly out of the warehouse. So that's kind of what I believe in. We are a lot more focused on, we have reverse ETL capabilities and some of the activation capabilities are, but our big focus is more around the first half, right? Making sure the data comes, it is modeled properly, et cetera, et cetera.
And so there's an old adage in data, garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. When I look at a lot of folks we talk to in the market, there's a lot of garbage in. Where do you see for folks who are looking to either start their CDP journey or really develop their CDP journey in their center of excellence? What is some guidance that you can provide? And what are some sort of best practices around what things can look like 2 years from now, and how to really get to a place where data quality is leveled up? And what are some of the technology considerations that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, right? I mean, if you are not if your data is messy, and if you don't have clean tracking plans and a clear definition of events and properties and so on, unless you have that, you cannot make good use of that data, either in the modeling layer or in the subsequent activation layers. I mean, if you have 5 definitions of an event called login event, login event web app, login event mobile app, login event iOS version 23, iOS version 24, right? If you have 10 different definitions of a login event, you clearly cannot consume it in analytics or activation or anything, right? So you need to have a very clear definition of events, but it's kind of surprisingly hard to achieve, right? I mean, if you start with a clean slate, yes, I mean, you can create a tracking plan. There are good products to do that, in RudderStack, outside of RudderStack, where You can define a tracking plan, make sure events conform to the tracking plan, and then we'll make sure bad events are rejected and so on, right? So people starting from scratch, it's kind of easy. It's work, but it can be done. But the reality is most of the world has already some tracking that has been implemented over the years, and that diverges, right? I mean, people come, go, different PMs at their own events and so on. So the world is in a very messy state today. And if you're going from that messy state into a clean state, it is sometimes can be a painful year-long exercise. And how do you make that happen? It's in my mind, these are the challenges we get excited about, and then these are problems to be solved, right? I mean, maybe some of the chat GPT, whatever LLM capabilities can help there. But again, this is definitely a problem that is worth solving in the data collection side of things.
Got it. And I would, obviously at Simon, we have a similar thesis around how the cloud data warehouse, does represent, not just the best technical solution to centralize all your data, but also just represents sort of a real point of inertia for the broader market, in that, ultimately you can only have one source of truth for your customers. Otherwise you have big problems. And furthermore, data challenges are just fundamentally hard, and having them, owned and managed in a singular fashion by, a team that is 100% dedicated to doing nothing else except, catalog and warehouse, the highest quality, most complete, view of the customer and the business is, where things must be heading. And I think, I've said this for over a decade now, but we're actually at a place now where the technology really permits it. And when I project out 2 years from now, definitely it's our strong belief that that's where things will be heading. I think one question that one question that we ask, and assuming this might, we might have a difference of perspectives here across our two approaches, is how to think about streaming data and real time data within the cloud data warehouse, and what that looks like, and if there are technology limitations today, what that might look like in 2 years from now, and how that also fits in with emerging technologies in sort of data real time and data streaming infrastructure space.
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is something we talk about internally and externally quite a bit, right? I think real time is one of those things where people talk about it we need it and so on, but it's kind of really boils down to what use cases are you trying to drive out of real time, right? I mean, if the use case is I did some action on my mobile app, right? I came to the checkout page and I dropped off, and I want to trigger a email notification or a push notification based on that action, right? There, real time makes sense, right? Clearly, you don't want to send a notification even minutes later, hours later, right? Or if it is a password reset, you want to take action immediately right after that, right? That's kind of one extreme where real time makes sense, and absolutely you cannot enable that use case by landing the data in the warehouse and activating it out of the warehouse, right? You have to support that real time connection from your data capture to your data engagement layer, whether it's a marketing tool or a CDP, which is sending the end notification. The other extreme of real time use cases are you build some kind of a model, a recommendation system which updates your news feed, right? And the question is how real time do you really need it to be real time, right? I mean, even if you look at the state of art at Netflix and Amazon, it's not that your feed is updated, your own custom model about your own recommendations is updated in real time, right? It is computed in some batch. There are technical complexities involved in being able to update a model and so on. You're typically doing it in batch, and you kind of handle that in two ways. That you have a user recommendation, and you have you watched a movie X, and you recommend other things which are similar to movie X, right? Both these models, right? Both similar to a movie and similar to your user profile. These are both updated in batch. You just have to serve this model in real time, right? Clearly, you have to do that, but you don't. That serving layer can be done out of a data warehouse, but you don't have to update the model in real time. So these are use cases where, again, I think when people say real time, I've heard great things about TikTok's recommendation. I don't know what it does internally. Maybe it is completely in real time, but even that I would be very surprised. I mean, probably a lot of that computation is still in batch because it's very, very costly to like update every user's model in real time as they are like working through it. So that's kind of the other extreme of real time, I believe, right? So you have to enable some use cases, but like the majority of the use cases, I think batch is good enough, and then the warehouse first architecture kind of makes sense. I don't know, what's your perspective?
Yeah, and so I guess there are two questions. One is, what are your requirements? So if you're putting up, setting up a CDP and then setting up your CDP strategy, projecting out 2 years from now, you need to ask, what do I need to do? And I agree that the vast majority of use cases do not require true real-time support. The question, I guess, to ask beyond that is, for those that do require true real-time support, where will Snowflake, BigQuery or any of that cohort be at a place where they can really drive 100 millisecond latency, transactional, atomic type of guarantees, that certainly they cannot today.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I have been in in the academic world, and I'm talking about like 20 years ago, right? When I was in grad school, like people were talking about this unification of like OLAP and OLTP workloads, right? I mean, that was the holy grail for like I don't know for how long. People have been always talking about like, can I serve both OLTP and OLAP workloads out of a single database, data warehouse? And like, that's like, if you can do that, that's amazing. But I think like the reality is like these like the underlying database technologies are very different, right? I mean, to support OLAP kind of systems, you are like doing columnar storage, and like you're really optimizing for like analytics queries, which are like efficient scan of large data. And OLTP, on the other hand, is like you do like row-wise storage, like you're really optimizing for like sub-millisecond updates of records and so on, right? So I think because the underlying technologies, I don't know if you can ever like truly unify into one storage. Maybe Flash will help, like you don't need like disk storage and then so on. So to be seen, but like, yes, Snowflake and BigQuery, and they have been adding more real-time support, clearly. I mean, you can stream into BigQuery now. Snowflake also introduced a bunch of capabilities around that. So it'll get there. I think like the ingestion will be real-time. That probably means, but then are you really going to power dashboards, right? The cost of powering like dashboards in real time, firstly, do you even need that? And the cost of that is also like something to take into, like just ingestion does not make the entire stack end-to-end real time, right? There is the modeling layer. If you're running DBT or if you're doing some other modeling, are you running that also like every millisecond, microsecond? Like those kind of things also have to be figured out. Like it's not just ingest.
Yeah, no, it's always funny whenever I'm anywhere near Oracle's headquarters and look at their at their campus. They look like database towers, and I know Larry Ellison always says, why does Amazon Web Services have 43 databases when you should just need one? Yeah. And then I always forget that the founding engineers at Snowflake came from Oracle. So and Snowflake now has their Unistore initiative, and they still have some work to do before they get there for sure, if they get there. But I would agree with your response 100%.
Yeah, and even Oracle has two. Like, I mean, they have the Oracle database, and they also have the Exadata products for their like the OLAP, like the data warehouse kind of workload. So it's, even like Oracle is not that they kind of figured out the unification. There are two Oracles, and like even in Exadata, I'm probably like there are probably multiple variations of that. So yeah.
Yep. Let's talk about let's move on to applications. Certainly third-party cookies are on their way to full deprecation. So that's the thing that theoretically should be in place 2 years from now. What are some other trends you see around identity that are just going to be materially different in the coming years?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like from like third-party cookies going away, right? I mean, the whole ad ecosystem, and I'm not like deeply into it, but like if you look at the DSPs and SSPs and like the ad exchanges, like all that ecosystem will be like gone, right? So in like 2 years, 3 years, so there will be like literally first-party data, and there will be walled gardens, right? There will be like Facebook and Google and Amazon and Apple. That like they will have like pretty much all user data will be centralized into these 4 vendors. Like they will know anything and everything about the users, and then brands and so on. You're kind of stuck with like whatever first party data you have. These walled gardens will not give you any data. Like, I mean, that's kind of their whole moat and business model. But then they will at least ingest data from you, right? So you like whatever first party data you can collect, you can then maybe slice and dice and that data, and then give it to the walled gardens to like target and so on. So I guess like that's where the world is going. And I think, as like a brand, what additional data can you get out of beyond your first party data? Like traditionally you rely with like DMPs and so on to get like some more additional attributes about your data so that you can target more effectively. But I think like if you assume that is going away, then you're kind of like whatever data you have, that's extremely important. Like you at least start collecting that data and then like rely on these wall gardens to like slice, dice that, target that, and so on. I think plus your own channels, right? Your own email, your own push notification you have. That's where I guess like the world is going. But again, you know this about this space a lot more, so I'd love to hear what you are saying.
Yeah, I always joke that, my first party data is your third party data, so no one can take that away from us. And I think, the deprecation of cookies really just changes the medium in which data is shared. And if you think back about how your browser actually works, it's incredibly primitive and it's incredibly limited. And the reason why so much ad tech, came, to popularity was just, really just, simplicity, speed to market, and the fact that it worked well enough. And I think the deprecation of cookies is really just going to push all that data into the cloud. We're already seeing big changes around centralized identity management, technologies and initiatives rather like UID2, and you look at businesses like LiveRamp and Newstar who have traditionally held central places around identity management. They're starting to having to rethink everything they do fundamentally. And I think many folks are looking to own this problem more centrally, and ultimately it's going to be a huge disruptive force. And Snowflake certainly is looking to be at the center of all this. As with BigQuery for that matter, because when you're in a world where you can't store third-party data in the browser, it's all being stored in a cloud data warehouse. And the question is which data warehouse and which one has the right application tier on the right infrastructure to allow brands to to get the right third-party data into their systems and to build the right models of identity so that they can properly onboard, properly target, and really leverage all the first, second, and third-party data that they've had over the last decade, but quite frankly with much higher potential.
Yeah, that's super interesting because again, I'm by no means an expert in this space. I mostly look at what our customers are doing. Yes, if you look at LiveRamps and so on, their entire ID graph was built on cookie and cookie syncing between publishers and so on. All that is gone, but at the same time, they have built this identity graph, right? They know that these email addresses are tied together, and so they already have a asset that they have built with cookie syncing, but now it is with them, right? Now, how they keep it updated and is a question. I don't know what is the strategy for that, but they already have an asset that they are now making available through the Snowflake marketplace, right? You can now sync and get LiveRamp IDs in the Snowflake ecosystem. So yeah, it's a fascinating space. I think you can argue that whatever the business that LiveRamp built on the browser, right? The that same business can be replicated in a Snowflake marketplace, right? I have first party data. 100 brands of first party data. Can you do that unification instead of in the browser? Can you do it in the cloud data warehouse, and how much Snowflake kind of enables that? That's kind of definitely interesting and so on. But I do believe though that it's not just about the technology. It is also about the acceptance of what users are okay with versus what are they not okay with, and so on going forward. So I think the general trend, even if you can replicate the entire browser cookie sync in the cloud data warehouse, generally the third-party ecosystem data sharing will go down. It'll be first-party data, and when I project 10 years later or so, it'll probably be first-party data, and then few walled gardens which have direct relationship with the customers. They will have the biggest data sets. But again, who knows? That's hard to guess.
Yep. No, it's. I think getting back to the first part of the conversation. The entire strategy across all these big cloud data warehouse providers, is to get as much data into their cloud data warehouse as possible. And between BigQuery and Snowflake, they both see huge potential and network effects, in driving that. So I think aligning to that world, I think is just absolutely critical. Let's move on to AI for a few minutes and then go on from there. But I'll maybe start with our perspective on AI because it really tees into a lot of what you said. And that really starts with garbage in, garbage out. generative AI is truly, a once in a decade or once in really 20 years moment, for machine learning. I do believe that. But the challenge, that's number one. Number two is, I think the work that OpenAI has done around ChatGPT is obviously the front runner here, and they've just done a superb job of showing the potential around a handful of use cases by globally leveraging data across the web. I think for so many brands today, the opportunity is in how do you apply that to your first party data. How do you take the potential that you can see in ChatGPT and use it to create one-to-one content, use it to create deep inferences for your business, use it to optimize your processes, use it to create automated personalization, and with the code generation capabilities and possibilities. But the challenge with all those use cases is that if your first party data isn't accurate, isn't complete, or if it's wrong and bad, you're stuck with the same garbage in, garbage out problem, which has plagued machine learning for the last 20 years and beyond. So that's our sort of starting thesis, and this is why a lot of our perspectives on architecture are focused on making sure that we're aligned with where we see the source of excellence heading, for data generally. Obviously, we have a whole bunch of application functionality that directly leverages and develops AI across traditional AI, deep learning, and generative AI beyond that. But Sumi, I'm sort of curious your perspective on the space and how you all think about supporting the next generation of AI.
Yeah, I think I'll make two comments. I completely aligned with you that on the activation layer, right? I mean, I think that whole layer will be reimagined in 5 years, right? If you think about today, and again, this is me looking at outside. I've never been a marketeer before, but the whole idea of you're creating segments and you're thinking of campaigns and journeys and so on, that whole idea of thinking as in groups of users, right? And give some treatment to a group of users that you come up with, right? That should be automated in some sense, right? I mean, if you tell everything and anything about a user to something like a LLM, they should be able to craft that perfect next message that you, or the perfect promotion and so on. What are the pieces of that stack? Yeah, it will be built, and companies like you will innovate and build the right stack for that. But I think that's where the world is heading. On the data side of things, right? I mean, that's what I get excited about and so on. Absolutely, I think, and it's kind of I feel almost like a double-edged sword, right? I mean, for traditional machine learning, right? If you are building a lead scoring model or a recommendation model, and we have been investing quite a bit of that. I mean, we have done some LLM work, but we launched a product called Profiles ML again to enable those traditional ML use cases. And there you clearly need very good data, right? I mean, if your data is messy and so on, you cannot build models. You cannot define features and build models and so on. So that is definitely true. But then if you think about if what will happen in 10 years, right? I mean, if that box, which is predicting the next best action for a user, or so on, or the predicting whether the user will churn or not, right? If that box is replaced by something like a ChatGPT kind of an application, then the question is how much clean data do you really need feeding into that box, right? You can think of language is the ultimate dirty data, right? I mean, when you're talking about communication, it's very, very messy, noisy, there is no structure. And then I mean, again, purely thinking about ChatGPT as a black box, you take that language and it is able to make sense out of it, right? I mean, from a very, very messy data. And because you had so much of data to train on. Now, does that same thing apply to dirty first party data? Probably not, because you don't have so much data to train your model so that you can make sense out of the messiness. But so, yeah, I mean, I'm not giving a clear answer, but I do believe that the value of clean data some of the messiness can be absorbed by the ML box, right? Of dirty data. The ML box will be able to make sense out of even dirty data. Doesn't diminish the importance, because there are use cases beyond ML. There's analytics use cases, activation use cases. But I think eventually, though, some of it will be, some of the messiness will be handled.
That's a great perspective. Is really asking the question around whether advancements in AI can question some of the old adage around garbage in, garbage out. I know one thing that we always work with our customers around is folks who are just getting into CDP. They might look at their data and be like, oh, we're not ready. And you need to start somewhere. And if you always say you're not ready, and some folks legitimately aren't ready, but some folks who say that they're not ready, are in fact, at a place where they can, at least deploy a handful of use cases that, can drive, revenue and results. A question that listeners should ask is, projecting out 2 years. I mean, it's hard to say that, it's hard to ever argue that you shouldn't invest in improving your data quality, but I think maybe expecting that some of the AI technology can actually help some of your data challenges. Certainly a refreshing perspective. On the other side, in terms of pure play AI, my projection and our vision, and certainly what I would really encourage everyone who's looking to double down on their AI marketing strategy is just to think bigger. And there are really two sides of the coin to be considering. The first is your workflow. Among all the day-to-day that you and your team affect, how much this feels repetitive, how much this feels non-strategic, and how much this feels as if, with 10x, 50x, better tools and AI-powered technology, you can completely automate and or take from hours of busy work to minutes of clicking buttons and typing a few words in a text box. And the second point is then just thinking much bigger around the end customer experience and what it could truly look like to double your CAC to LTV ratios, really optimize your conversion rates materially, and by double I mean have your CAC to LTV ratios, and really just think big around what the potential is, and expect big as well when you're having conversations with your team, with your with potential vendors, with partners and beyond. So I'm sort of very excited about this personally. Certainly given my background, pre Simon data, and back to my academic days. So Soumya, we're sort of at the top of the show here. Bonus question for you. If you were to have this conversation again with anyone in the world, who would it be with and why?
Yeah, I'd love to the things we are talking about, right? This is very fascinating, and I'm also learning. So I'd love to have this conversation with somebody from the broader LLM space, right? Maybe Sam Altman, or somebody in Google or Facebook. I mean the traditional Yale, Akun, or maybe Hinton, right? What are their perspective of cleanliness of data and kind of use cases out of that data, and how does this stack look like? So I think that might be a fascinating conversation.
That would be a fascinating conversation. And I wrote about a story on the Simon Data blog recently, but I met Jan LeCun after a presentation I did in grad school. I won an award at the International Machine Learning Conference, and he came to me after the fact. This was 2006, and he was like, Your methods are not powerful enough to solve any interesting real world problems. You need to be using neural networks. And this was before deep learning was reinvented, and before before Google and and everyone really revolutionized the way these things are trained. And I was just like, I got some good results. I'm just trying to finish my degree here. Thank you. It was nice to meet you. But then, of course, now he's Facebook's chief AI scientist, or whatever Zuckerberg has appointed him. So it's really amazing what's happened in a little over a decade broadly around deep learning. But really sort of summarizing the show, I think for folks listening, I really do expect things to look materially different in 2 years than they do today. There's so many parts across core data infrastructure, across identity management and third-party cookies, and across AI breakthroughs that are just pushing for real disruption and changes in the space. It'll be tremendously interesting to see what happens with some of the established players. Because I do firmly believe that more than ever, there's a real opportunity for disruption. And when I say disruption, yes, that includes category disruption and vendor disruption. But for listeners today, I think it's really just disrupting your own business in a great way. and really asking how do I level up what I've been doing in a way that's more than just making my workflows a tiny bit better or incremental improvements to data access. Really just rethinking the way you do things and the opportunity, and that really is what excites me every day when I get up and continue to build a business and talk with customers and and with folks like you see me around where the category is heading.
Yeah, I mean, same here. I mean, this is like a very exciting space. Like, this is probably the best time to be in data, right? I mean, I've been in this space for like the 20 years, and if I look at like the early 2000s, like, yes, there was a lot of interesting challenges, but we are talking only in the context of like rocket simulations and big data, and there's like not much innovation happening. But so that's the wrong statement. I think like the innovation was very confined in the specific domains. Versus like if you look at today, there is just so much moving parts, and like this is the decade of data, right? And I think I'm really excited to be like at least in the space, right? And learning from like leaders like you and then the broader ecosystem. And yeah, hopefully we'll do something useful.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. And Soumya, for anyone who wants to learn more about RudderStack, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, they can hit me up on LinkedIn. I have a very unique first name, so like it should be easy to find as Soumyadeb, or like you can just email me at like soumyadeb@rudderstack.com. We have a website. They can request, like if it's a commercial conversation, they can request a demo. So like one thing we have done well as vendors is like make it easy for people to contact us. Like, I mean, so it should be pretty easy.
Great. And thank you for everyone listening to today's episode of the Data Unlocked podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Simon Data, please visit us on the web at simondata.com or email us at hello@simondata.com.